Hello and welcome to another episode of Overcoming Self-Doubt. I'm Linda Ching and we've been exploring through these interviews something that we all deal with. For some of us it's constant, for some of us it's occasional, but it's how can we speed through self-doubt to get to making decisions, taking action and helping change to happen. Today I'm joined by Helen Williams. Hello Helen.
Hi Linda.
So Helen, I know from Vitaccess. I sit on the advisory board there, so I may sound a little gushing about Vitaccess because I'm very proud to be associated. Vitaccess is a multi-award-winning first startup, then scale-up. It's had phenomenal growth since it was founded back in 2014. And it's gone through a lot of change in that time. Helen is the Director of Operations there. She's one of the key faces on stage as Vitaccess accepts awards. And one of the things when I first met Helen, I was surprised to find, and is captured actually from her Twitter bio, so I'll read it out. Linguist, highly qualified in Italian detective novels, somewhat mysteriously finds herself leading a digital healthcare scale-up. So linguist, and that's specific, Italian detective novels. How does someone go from that to heading up a digital healthcare scale-up? And did that involve any self-doubt for you, Helen?
Yeah, it's a bit of a random segue, isn't it? And absolutely, it did involve self-doubt. I can think of a few examples. The course itself, doing a doctorate, that was a process. The trying to figure out if I wanted to stay in academia, which I loved the rigor. I loved working with my professor and colleagues, but I always felt in my gut that actually the teaching aspect was what I really loved about it. And I wasn't so much the person who liked to be alone with books in the library, ironically. I enjoyed that for a bit, but I didn't want my career to be so solitary. So that was a bit of soul searching. And of course you start thinking, well, I'm qualified. Am I making a big mistake moving away from that? I don't know. I kind of follow my gut and somebody just gone by in a builder's hat. I'm sorry. I was looking around, I was exploring options and came across a vacancy for a firm called Oxford Outcomes. And I thought, well, what's the harm? It's in languages, it's in translations. So I'll give that a whirl and see if I like it. And if not, it was very hard to find a job in Italian academia. It wasn't just finding a job in Italian, it was finding a job in modern Italian. And it's not the most widely studied subject. So it was a whole journey of figuring that out. And I always think of these things as fate, but the day of my Viva where I got the doctorate, the interview for Oxford Outcomes was the next day. And I'd had various interviews before that hadn't gone so well. But because I was so built up for the Viva and channeling all my energy there, I did prepare for the interview, but I didn't worry so much about it as I normally would. So I kind of went in much more relaxed and much more me and happy with what had happened the day before with the Viva and got the interview, got the job. So I went for it, and then it just felt like a duck to water, that job. I absolutely loved it, and I had a really brilliant mentor. So, but yeah, it was full of self-doubt the whole way. Should I leave academia? Should I try something new? Am I going to have to start at the beginning?
Lots of questioning of yourself, but actually ultimately you just pushed ahead. Was there a key technique or thought process to enable you just to keep pushing forward?
It sounds a bit basic, but my mum always said to me, if you're not sure, close your eyes and just listen to whether it's a yes or a no ultimately. So whenever I come across a big soul searching moment, and I remember this happening in between degrees as well, feeling really lost in the summertime. What do I do? What does the future hold? Or what are all these options you could go for? How do you make the right decision? And I think I just kind of take time to think about it and breathe and try and listen to myself.
So your self-awareness about what feels right to you and actually making the time and space to enable that to happen, to feel like you're in that moment of reflection.
I think so. And sounding board, not everybody, but a key few people who you trust just to talk to, I find.
That's interesting to hear you say that, because you were key behind establishing an advisory board for Vitaccess. I think the team is amazing. You've got a great mix and you've done a lot in building the culture there so that there is masses of diversity, so you have all of that around the table, but yet you still felt the need for something beyond that. Do you think that's part of the same technique, when to get that kind of external opinion?
I think we knew that it was a very core team at that point. I think the danger of being a really small team is that your perspective is it was us four for such a long time, and we knew that getting another perspective on the decisions we were making and the future growth would be really useful, and from lots of different perspectives. So the board, as you know, it's made up of those with healthcare backgrounds, those with startup backgrounds, those with coaching backgrounds, legal, finance. We really wanted those extra opinions. I think we thought about it right from the beginning, really, because we knew it was dangerous to just have ourselves as a small core team making all those decisions.
Mm-hmm. So knowing when to go out to get extra support in some way. And in terms of the growth of the team, because you talk about the four of you as the management team, but obviously the team around you is much bigger. How have you guys been coping with this lockdown and remote working and having the team everywhere? We've
always been a flexible employer, so we've all worked remotely. We didn't have to set anybody up from home who'd never worked from home. All we had to do was do a bit of a mad dash to the office to give some people an extra monitor. So setup, we were all used to that. We have an extra director now too. We have Casey, so he's in the US. So we've also got used to remote managing, and we have team members in Barcelona and Paris and Greece and Geneva. So we've been really used to working like that. But it was more a case of formalizing it and making sure we'd covered all the right bases. We've got a great HR team, and they helped us put together working from home. It wasn't guidelines, it was more like, what's our ethos about this? Don't worry if you've got children. Don't worry if your cat comes on screen. We're all at home, we're all in this. We can't put, a front on, really. Just be yourselves and don't worry. The important thing is we're trying to communicate and we're asking each other how we are. I think that was our approach. Just looking after each other.
I know that there's a big element of care about this. And you, Helen, care about how everything works and how everyone's feeling. How does that play into self-doubt for you? Because it's a lot to manage. You're relaxed that someone in a builder's hat is popping past the back of the screen.
Kind of.
So there is that element of how you handle it and your confidence about it. Does that demeanour reflect everything that you're handling and taking on in terms of that care? So you're very calm.
Well, I'm not really. I think paddling furiously below the surface. And I think a good example is I just decided the other Friday I was going to write an email to the team about just, I think it was Mental Health Awareness Week, and just some tips and tricks and making sure we were all there for each other and to thank them for their hard work and looking out for each other. And I thought, rather than an email, I'll practice what I preach and I'll jump on camera. So I just sat in the garden and did a quick video. And everybody responded really well because I kind of just talked about the challenges I was facing. The house is trashed. I'm going round and round in circles, cleaning up in between meetings and working much longer. And, the days are very long in lockdown, trying to manage everything, family and work. So, yeah, I think I've realised from that was a really good illustration of how actually a team appreciates you just being authentic and knowing that they're not on their own feeling the same way. But yeah, I've always gone to work sort of with my lipstick on and my hair done and an outfit on. That's who I am. It's my way of facing the day. But it doesn't mean that I don't have self-doubt and little nagging voices in my head, or times when I go home and overanalyze conversations. And I think I'm a people-pleasing personality. I do worry about other people, but that's not just worrying about them, it's worrying about how I come over as well. So there's a lot of, in my private space and time, me overly worrying probably, what did they think about that when I gave that presentation, or pushed myself out of my comfort zone there. And more often than not, probably the other person doesn't really register it, but you go home and think about it, don't you? Well, I do.
I'm completely with you. And I coach many people that would be absolutely seen as extroverts, incredibly confident individuals. And in many regards they are, but what a lot of people wouldn't necessarily guess is how they need to decompress afterwards. How they need to sort of really step back and, having enjoyed all that energy, actually need to protect themselves for a while and decompress and take stock. And part of it is, I think, quite common to think about how they analyse through it. So what seems like very natural exuberance actually can become quite self-critical when they look back and think, oh, should I have said that? Should I have been that bouncy almost in that meeting or in that networking event? So it's quite interesting to hear you say that, Helen, because there's a big gap there between the perception and reality for that individual and how they're handling
Absolutely. And it's different. Being aware of different work styles and personalities is so important in the workplace, isn't it? Because when I work with somebody who's much quieter, my interpretation when I worry too much can be, oh, what were they thinking about what I was saying? Or why did they go quiet then? Was that because what I said was not quite right? And actually, perhaps they were just weighing it up and working through their thoughts, but they weren't going to share their thoughts in that moment because they wanted to go away and refine them before they shared them. So it's all about those differences, isn't it? And I think reminding yourself not to worry too much about that.
But being aware. So what you've described there is actually a very natural introvert-extrovert conflict, if you will. You know, extroverts in a big meeting will want to brainstorm every idea out because that's how often they do their best thinking. You know, they put an idea out there. They're not worried if it's right or wrong. They want to hear what the room thinks about it, and they'll take that idea and move it along as a consequence of the engagement they get. Whereas an introvert is much more likely to want to take that idea, go out of the room and ponder it. And they may come back into the room with 3 or 4 other brilliant ideas, but not immediately. They need that time to reflect by themselves about it. And so I guess if you've got the mix of those kind of extroverts and introverts in a meeting where they don't recognise that, it's the extrovert not understanding their wish to get ideas is actually stressing someone out and making them not be able to come up with the best suggestion.
That's right.
And so it's really fascinating to think about those dynamics. So
and that's challenging in this period with the remote aspect as well, because if someone's camera's not switched on and you can't really gauge it as if you were in a room, normally you'd have those signals. But we've come up with some thoughts to share with the team on how to interact during this period, sort of how we recommend videos being on, but don't worry if you can't have it on at that moment. You know, it's relaxed, but we say to them, it is really nice to see faces. It does make a difference if you can and if you're comfortable too. And what I was going to mention as well, Linda, I was thinking from the linguist perspective, something I was reading about with self-doubt and language, which I find quite interesting because I think I do it, is that people can give linguistic reveals as to their self-doubt, and I think I do it. So one example is you might try and mimic their accent or their register or something like that, and it's a way of bonding, but also it can reveal your own insecurity at that moment. I think there was a study in the 60s in New York where people were doing it more on a sort of in a department store. They were trying to raise their level of talking by using their R's, so saying 4th floor, whereas the local accent was to say fourth without the R. And this chap analysed it and said it was a kind of way of trying to raise their status almost. And I think there's quite a lot of interesting research out there about verbal, reveals basically. But I definitely think I do that. In over-explaining and maybe now over-talking. And I go home and go, why did I keep explaining that my child had dragged something from the garden in during that conference call? I didn't need to reveal that, but I did. But I mean, it's a double-edged thing, isn't it? Because it might help you bond, but also people might go away thinking, what was she on about?
So it can be a tell. That's really interesting. So yeah. I guess it's showing sort of a nervousness. Is that what you're explaining there? Where, okay. And that's okay, isn't it? I guess it's recognising that. Because one of the key themes that has certainly come through in these interviews is how much self-awareness you need to have about when you're being challenged by self-doubt. Because it's fine to have self-doubt. It's the fact if it limits your behaviour and limits the action, that's when it feels painful to the person.
It shouldn't be feared in a way. It should be seen as, I think it's quite a humble thing in a way, isn't it? To know, well, it keeps you humble to know that you doubt, and that actually helps you improve maybe, or think about things, or come up with new options. If we just went ahead blindly confident throughout life without challenging anything, where would we be? I think those moments of self-doubt have a function actually.
Has there been self-doubt even doing the interview in lockdown with small children in the house?
Yeah, because you'd like to be your most composed self. That's been one of the challenges actually of lockdown. It's the mental focus. That's my biggest challenge, I think. Not having the 8 hours or whatever in a row to just concentrate on work and then shift back into parent mode and nursery pickup time. It's the juggling and the, you get good at multitasking, but it's the mental focus. It's having to have another sort of burst of energy in the evening to do more emails or get up early before everybody else is awake. And so yeah, definitely I doubted it. It's the ability to finish your train of thought, really, isn't it, with interruptions?
As if on cue there. So just to wrap up, any key themes that are keeping you cheery and smiley in these weird times, Helen?
Well, I think we're lucky because at Vitaccess it is business as usual. We're fortunate in that sense. We are being kept busy. So professionally, that's good and reassuring. And then at home, just be grateful. As one of your other interviewees said, it's having your house, your home, your people around you safe. We just have to plod on and see where we get. And I just try to stop every now and again and do something that calms me, whether it's piano or putting some music on. Just little tricks like that. You can't fix everything all at once, can you? It's a completely unprecedented work situation and home life situation.
Moments of serenity. Love it.
And a bit of lipstick. It doesn't go
amiss.
And a
bit of lipstick. What a combination.
There we go.
Well, thank you so much for your time today, Helen. Give the 2 little rascals a cuddle for me as well. And we'll speak again soon.